Well, hello everyone. You are watching simultaneously, I trust and hope, Silicon Curtain and Rashkin Report in English, because if you can watch three channels at the same time, why not? Subscribe, hit like, do all the things that polite people do in good company, and we're going to continue our ongoing, soon-to-be long-running series, Rashkin and Fink, where Jonathan Fink and myself talk about what's going on, with a perspective being that I was born in the former Soviet Union. I originally from Mordor. I was born in Moscow, and I live most of my life in the United States. In fact, I'm a local elected official here in the great state of Wisconsin. And I am joined by Jonathan Fink, host of Silicon Curtain, and a man who does such a wonderful job educating English speakers on what is going on in Ukraine, in Russia, in the war that I think it fascinates a lot of people, but also confuses a lot of people. And Jonathan, thanks to you for bringing a lot of clarity to this for a lot of English speakers. I try to do the same in Russian, and so together here we are once a week.
Here we are. I think it's a great format, and sometimes it's a challenge trying to sort of decode what's going on. It's certainly a challenge staying on top of the fire hose of news which we're inundated with. And we won't hold it against you for being born in Mordor. I mean, you don't choose your place of birth.
Thank you. And I try to, squeeze that orc out of me every day, one drop at a time. But that's how we are. In the meantime, here in the United States, everything is now appears to be being tested through this lens of, is President Donald Trump trying to distract our attention from the Epstein case? And this can be something as simple and used to be fun. Let's take citizenship away from an actress we don't like. Ha 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 ha. This is going to be great. No, this is a distraction. Okay, not working. What about we're going to try to test Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez for her IQ? And at the same post say that Trump passed that exam perfectly. How can you do an IQ exam perfectly? I don't even know. But didn't fly anywhere either, because that's a distraction. And he tried to announced that the team of a football team, American football, should be Redskins and nothing but Redskins, knowing that it's going to be deeply offensive. This is not a new issue. Didn't go anywhere because it's Epstein. So it's hard.
And one wonders where this will go, because he's not going to stop until he finds something that genuinely distracts. Because this seems to me, and it is quite interesting, because many people thought that there was no point at which MAGA cultists would break with their cult idol. There was no issue which they would part company. But of course, Iran has really tested some of their loyalty, and now Epstein. This seems to be the break point. It's like, you promised us the details, and if you don't deliver them, then you're part of the deep state. This seems to be a curious inflection point for many in MAGA. Do you have a way of explaining that? Because I find it actually confusing.
I find it very interesting, and I guess almost revealing on several levels. For starters, I see the Democrats in the United States apparently have been speaking about the wrong thing, because they've been concerned about policy. And we see that MAGA Republicans are really at the level of emotional concern over a criminal case of terrible crime, but that affects a small group of people. And Democrats have historically been kind of more about policy, which affects a greater number of people by definition. Missing the boat that one particular case has become the binding conspiracy of the MAGA movement. And in fact, now the Democrats all of a sudden caught on to this fact. They're voting at every opportunity to make this case come to, the light and to reveal all the information, which is kind of suspicious at first, especially for MAGA types, because they thought that this was the list of all the evil Democrats, starting with Bill Clinton. But it turns out the Democrats are like, please take Bill Clinton. This is great. Is there anybody else on there? Let's clean the house. And so there isn't much, resistance from that side of the aisle. But at the same time, president himself is now either admitting, trying to cover up that he was involved in this, while Democrats kept saying, well, the secretary, the Justice Department looked into it, said there's nothing, so I guess there's nothing. But that's not how MAGA supporters work. They're like, okay, we're not getting the full case. That means that either he did it or he's hiding people that have done it. And now Republican Party officials, elected officials, have to vote to not release the information. So they're like become part of this cover up. And for people who are maybe not into the fine details of policy, but who are very passionately engaged in this one issue, I think that if they don't see some blood, they're going to be going for that, like the piranhas almost, where they're so bloodthirsty that if Trump is not going to give them the victim, they will, make him one. And it's a very interesting development, especially when you look at the story itself, in which it's very clear that Donald Trump and Jeffrey Epstein, as was reported by New York Times a couple of days ago, were close friends, were clearly like sexual predators, and in the area, in the neighborhood that they were working, circles of, influential people, whatever. And then they got into a fight over, so apologies to all the ancient Greeks. This was not over a woman. This was about a piece of real estate. And they couldn't figure out what to do with the real estate. And so they became enemies. And after that, Jeffrey Epstein started having problems with law. Before that, when he was friends with Trump, no problems. Now he's enemies with Trump, now problems start. And then when Trump becomes president in 2019, Epstein dies in a prison cell. So, I mean, like, if you think about it, Donald Trump is the one who should be really concerned about this coming to light. And his crowd is just so decided that, Trump himself barely talked about this, but people around him built careers and out of talking about this conspiracy. So they are very vested, and their credibility, it depends on them doing something about this. And now we get to watch this next act of the show where Republican politicians get to pick, are they with their base or are they with their cult leader? And that's a very difficult decision for them to make. And so far, they're, it's a personal choice.
And there's two angles which I find especially interesting. Now, apart from all the detail that's coming out or may come out, which I think is going to be fascinating, there are some little subplots going on, which I think are incredibly curious. One, of course, is the Democrats. Well, maybe this isn't quite so surprising. They've been quite passive throughout, Trump's administration so far, given the challenges to rule of law, given the challenges to the very foundations of democracy. There's far less pushback than one would hope. There's not none, but there's less. In this instance, maybe it's a good strategic choice to just hold back. Because if they were to get involved, then suddenly the Epstein thing would be a Democrat hoax and blah, blah, blah. And then you might see, if they were attacking Trump, you might see some of his base come round and say, okay, our guy's under attack, etc. The best thing maybe for them to do at this point is just hang back and let MAGA, tear chunks out of each other.
Well, that's been the approach of infamous political strategist James Carville for many years, which is if your opponent is running to off a cliff with an anvil, don't stand in his way. So I think that's kind of where Democrats find themselves, is just kind of saying, you really want to do this. In fact, in this situation, Democrats are speaking about the Epstein case, but they also are trying to speak about policy, trying to draw some kind of a distinction that this is what they offer versus this is what Trump is offering. But it is just remarkable how this is not just populism. This is some kind of a level of populism, conspiracy based, that Democrats just this is not the depth they're used to plowing. So it'll be curious to see how they will look to motivate the people that they, because those are voters, they're customers. So maybe there's a conspiracy, well, I don't know, a way to tell the truth to people that support Trump that would maybe just explain the story about Epstein. that would make that would allow Democrats to connect with those common folk that apparently they just can't interest in politics by saying you're going to lose your health insurance, you're going to lose your savings, retirement, stack, whatever. No, 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 no. But like this case, that's where, it makes me think of Star Trek 5, where Captain Kirk is on some planet and he's fighting this alien and he's punching him and punching him, and it's not working. And then at one point he kicks him in the knee and the alien just bends over and falls down. And he says, like, what happened? And Spock says to him, not everyone has testicles in the same place. So this is just one of those perhaps situations where Democrats miss the testicles.
That's a lovely piece of analysis there. And another place of, where are the testicles is the other subplot, which is curiously JD Vance meeting with Rupert Murdoch at the same time as it seems they're trying to sort of polish him up, as it were, make him look a little more viable as a serious politician. And days later, Trump goes to war with Rupert Murdoch. I mean, this is quite extraordinary. I mean, everyone predicted pretty much Elon Musk falling out with Trump, and that seems to have actually only had blowback onto Musk. It doesn't seem to really have damaged Trump at all, or dimmed his popularity with his base. It's Musk who's really, star has dimmed significantly. This time, however, he's taking on the most powerful, arguably media mogul in history, the man whose networks helped to create Trump as a political phenomenon. He's going to war with him. I mean, who's going to win this one? And why is he doing it? Because it seems pretty crazy.
It does. But then again, how do you describe what Rupert Murdoch is doing when he owns the Wall Street Journal and Fox News? That's pretty crazy too. In Russian language, there's a word, actually, I think comes from Ukrainian story, zhabogadyuking, where you have a frog fighting a snake and it's just nasty and horrible. You don't really care who is going to win. And it's just an all, may they, get rid of each other. And in this situation, we see whether it's Musk or Murdoch, both of them, I'm saying, I think that audience of these channels should kind of appreciate this. I think have a pretty strong connection to Kremlin. And so to think that this kind of information that is being released at a moment when, Donald Trump is seems almost invincible, but Elon Musk decided to press the button because I guess this is part of that zhabogadyuking, when the frog attacks the snake, and he decided to release information that he had on Trump and suggested, interestingly, two things. Elon Musk suggested the situation with Serhiy Gore, and second, he suggested the Epstein case. So two of those bombs or grenades were tossed into the fire, and then to see what's going to blow up, and they blow up differently. Interesting, I don't think that Elon Musk is in as better shape as one might think, because I just saw a news bit that said that after reviewing the contracts for whether they're essential or not, NASA and basically Trump administration made a decision that they can't get rid of it. Like that Musk really has a lot of control over the space program of the United States. And so, like it or not, he's like, I guess he's going to remain the wealthiest man in the world. And that's going to continue to be problems for Trump. And Murdoch is really an interesting case because he has money, but then Fox News already lost money because of lying about Trump. So I would suspect that in a case, they will argue that this is unreliable news source and horrible. They already have a track record of losing in court. But I'm not an attorney and I don't play one on TV. But I think that Trump thinks that he's going to make Murdoch's life miserable by having him sit in for depositions and do all sorts of painful things that any 93-year-old man would love to do on his, instead of playing golf, I guess. So I think that Murdoch is also a very important test case for press freedom, because what they published is information that, according to, I believe, Julie Brown, is just tip of the iceberg. So, and Trump is very concerned about making sure, I guess, that the rest of the iceberg doesn't show up over the water. And if he's successful here, then this will really send a chilling message to people. But at the same time, we see that Trump's attempts at control get thrown out. He just had a lawsuit against Bob Woodward that was thrown out. So it seems that perhaps in actual courts, Trump is still not doing as well in suppressing freedom of speech as he is successful when he deals with corporate mergers. And when those corporate mergers are dependent on people shutting up, then people get shut up, and we see people, anchors from CNN that are no longer there. We see Stephen Colbert, who is a classic basically of American television. That's part of a CBS brand. Stephen Colbert, Walter Cronkite, Edward R. Murrow. They had some people, but now I guess it's just about the money. Just about the money. I think for those people that think it's just about the money, Stephen Colbert is from South Carolina. And you know who's from South Carolina, Jonathan? Lindsey Graham. And I think that could be a very nice opportunity for Stephen Colbert to stick it to Trump, and then who knows where he'll go if he gets elected to Senate.
And of course, it's a shame because this is a worldwide brand. There are many people who are following politics and actually see Stephen Colbert as not just one of the crucial checks and balances in American democracy. And I just put an episode live literally half an hour ago, which is about, I sort of paraphrase something from history. First, they come for the satirists. Well, actually, I kind of changed that a little bit, because first, clearly, they come for people who are powerless, especially those with black and brown skins. But when they come for the powerful, the first people they come for are satirists. And it seems that Colbert is one of the first sacrificial lambs in this process. But we're not living necessarily in an age where these networks are the only conduits. No, Tucker Carlson, unfortunately, has shown that you can lose the biggest job in TV, and you can rebuild your profile incredibly quickly. It's probably easier if you have Kremlin influence to do it. But Colbert could very quickly become, a voice on YouTube or whichever platform he chooses. So satire isn't necessarily dead, but it is moving into more maybe activist formats, moving away from the corporate formats. But also,
even though television is a dying medium, I think there's still a tremendous amount of prestige to being number one talk show host at that space. And just, it really is a kick in some kind of testicles. And I just think that Stephen Colbert is going to recover from this, and and Trump is going to regret, or Republican Party or whoever there is going to regret having pushed him out of entertainment this way. But yeah, he'll be fine. I think he'll make money either one way or another. And I suspect that he'll live comfortably in this country or any.
And of course, I draw the parallels to what happened in 1990s, late 1990s, early 2000s Russia. And of course, there, people who didn't conform with the new media environment weren't fine. They had to leave the country. They had to leave the networks, which were taken over by oligarchs. And there's some sort of patterns going on here, which is using instruments of corporate capitalism, but also using compliant oligarchs to take over networks and then strip them out of, starting with humorists and satirists, and then moving on to controlling the news formats. This is not unlike that. One of the earliest casualties was a satirical cartoonist of the Washington Post, which is owned by Jeff Bezos. So again, we see a process here of getting oligarchs to be compliant, to obeying in advance. The point I made is you don't have to give an explicit order. You don't have to write it down. All the tyrant has to do is give whispers and intimations, or just sort of, be heard saying when people pass him, who's going to rid me of this turbulent satirist? And then off it goes. If corporates are going to comply in advance, then we're halfway to an authoritarian regime.
I can't argue with anything you said. I think that that's the pathway, and the challenge is like, what do you do and how do you do it? Because I keep finding as I read news reports that people are trying to operate kind of like, well, we should do better in the next elections. Yeah, I mean, that goes without saying, but is that really the level of solution? And I'm not saying what the solution is. I'm just saying that the problem that we have right now, this was just 6 months of Trump. Do we want to like give this another, like what's going to happen? And it's not necessarily in our control. And just kind of take like a perspective. I was at a park here in Wisconsin and saw a sticker on the garbage can that said, this is fascism, start acting like it. And you just kind of go, yeah, there's this moment where you kind of realize who is running this show. And when I see politicians who are trying to stand up to it by arguing in ways that at least I guess appeal to old standards, it seems like that doesn't help leaders connect with people who are looking for real solutions.
And there's another subplot going on here, which is if Vance is being groomed, then it becomes interesting, as it were. I mean, terrifying as well.
Interestingly terrifying.
Interestingly
Absolutely.
terrifying. Yes. Stay tuned, folks. Because then it becomes something of a plot, I would say, which is okay. This guy Trump's not going to be around forever. At some point, he's going to have his last, cheeseburger or however many cheeseburgers he has at a sitting. Nobody knows. But at some point, he's going to croak, or the Epstein scandal will blow open, and this must always be known, a known possibility to those who've been behind the throne, as it were. So they need a protege. They need an heir. And Trump, in this case, is something of a battering ram. He comes in, he beats the doors down, he profoundly weakens the system of checks and balances, ready for a full authoritarian that follows him. Is this a worry that you've got?
Not at the moment, because other things are overweighing those particular worries. And the things you're describing were worrying me prior to election, because when you look at JD Vance and you see people that are behind him, people that have been financing him, people that have been grooming him, it is interestingly terrifying, because this is a techno-fascist and then cryptocurrency and all the kind of adventurous people that have low standards. Who were investing into this person, and now he is on his way, because he doesn't have to. The one person that Trump cannot fire is his vice president, which is part of the reason that the last one was chased around the Capitol with screams, "Let's hang him." So it's a dangerous job, and JD Vance decided to take it upon himself because the reward could be so fantastic. And you're right. Now Trump is even older than he was before, and who knows how many burgers he's got in him. He already got some kind of a diagnosis, but as long as he can play golf. So I think that JD Vance is very much just moving in the way. But I also feel that JD Vance is so kind of spineless that he could be something different, and he could be Khrushchev to Trump's Stalin, where he could be the one who says, well, this was, too much. Now we have to go in a different direction and be kind of lower the degree of aggression. And some things were wrong. But now let's move forward. So, because I find that the general philosophy of I prefer the devil I know to be a very misleading and lacking in substance. I feel like it's important to, the same way that in democracy, change of government and change of power is so crucial. With devils, it's also important to change them once in a while, because, like, for instance, the next one to come after Putin is going to be another one from KGB, FSB, and all that kind of stuff. But I still feel that in a situation where one person's whim have such tremendous influence, just changing that one person is going to just necessarily mean so many changes, because they're not really following like constitution to begin with.
But of course, those people then have to consolidate their own power. That takes time, and it's, at that point, it allows opposing forces to do something. And of course, this is crucial in terms of Ukraine, because whereas whoever follows Putin may be just as nasty as Putin, it's unlikely they will have the sort of profile and authority to continue a failing war. In fact, they may, and learn the lesson in Russian history, that actually the best way of consolidating power is to come to a terrible deal on the understanding that at some point in future you may be able to rework that deal, which Lenin, of course, did with the Germans in 1917. And actually that territory was then re-won after or during the Civil War, and all mostly reconstituted. In fact, after the Second War, they got more back than they lost originally in the first. So it may well be that actually for Ukraine, the best thing would be a change of power. And of course, we started with the intent. I'm going to try and link Vance with what Russia's doing here, because Russia is scaling up significantly its production of Shaheeds. It's scaling up how much it is hitting Ukrainian cities. That's getting really, really bad. And Trump seems to have, at least in tone, some kind of change of position. He's expressed frustration with Putin. He's given this 50 days. As a friend of mine who's on a very different political track than we are has pointed out, well, yes, it's 50 days where Russia can do what they want in Ukraine, but it's 50 days also where Ukraine can fight back without having its hands tied behind its back. And given some of the Biden policies under Biden-Sullivan, given the fact Ukraine was forced to tie its hands behind its back in the run-up to the election, and then again during the fake peace process that was ongoing for what felt like years, but it was just a few months, Ukraine was really stymied in how it could fight back. These 50 days cut both ways. I think that's something a lot of the media has missed.
Very much so. I look at this from Trump's point of view as kind of a Squid Game experience, where he says, you have 50 days, and then he exits the room and turns out the lights, and then sees who is going to emerge. If Ukraine comes out, well, I'm surprised, but here we are. Let's make, hey, by the way, those rare earth minerals, I own you. Or if Putin comes out, then it's like, hey, Vova, I was always for you. I was pulling for you, buddy. Let's make some. And by the way, that Ukraine owes me for rare earth minerals. So I think that for Trump, the worst case scenario is if nobody comes out. If there is like the battle goes on and he's stuck outside, not looking like a leader of anything, he's more of a supplier now. And a supplier that's kind of lacking, because there's a line forming of people who would like to get the stuff, and we just can't make it fast enough. So I think the other comparison that's to me fitting is what happened with Israel, because when Trump saw that Israel attack on Iran was as successful as it looked on Fox News, he decided that he needs to be part of this victory parade. And so that's where he is, it influenced his decision-making process. Television, pictures, flickering. It's amazing when the whole channel is designed for one viewer. It's like, telling our viewers, imagine that everything you looked at, was just at you, specifically speaking at you, and how awesome you are and how smart you are.
It's like an inverted Truman Show, isn't it? Where all of reality exists for one man's narcissism.
It really is. I think that's going to be a different movie, and I think it's going to be interestingly horrifying. I think that the option that I think Ukraine has is, and this has been talked, I'm not the first person, or it's been said before, is that Ukraine should be kind of like take Israel as a model of military buildup, of military resistance, of military self-sufficiency when you're in a dangerous neighborhood. That this is not a question of Israeli policy, which is entirely different conversation, but the strength, the projection of strength that is done by one small state is something that I think definitely needs to be respected, especially when Ukraine is looking at really being in charge of its own defense, because so much energy is spent by Putin to make sure that Ukraine never, ever, 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 ever becomes part of NATO, which is also trying to destroy at the same time. So that means that Ukraine needs to be kind of, take example of another state, Israel, that uses its strength. And when we see that this administration is now interested, supposedly, in Ukrainian drones, to me, that sends a very good signal that, yeah, I think Ukraine is starting to get there. Because if you have United States that says, hey, what do you have going on over there? You've got some interesting things that we're not just rare earth minerals that need to be, do all of that kind of, the same, that the resource economy that Russia knows all too well. But this is actually, you make something. This is not matryoshkas. Wow, it does something. So I think that this is a very important sign for Ukraine as well. And yes, it has 50 days. And interesting to me to see the peace process trying to kind of function through all of this, when it's also a theater of that one actor, when everything is going to pacify Trump. Do you want to see peace process? Yes. Here are Russians going to the peace process, and there's Ukrainians. Of course, with Ukrainians, you have to be concerned because there could be another spiderweb operation. But Putin is being Putin. And I think that's something that just needs to be mentioned in every stream, is that last night there was another huge attack on at least Kiev, but other cities. Oh, Ivano-Frankovsk, I heard as well.
It was, that was the Kiev #1 focus, but there's a lot of those. You've seen those maps where they show all the trails of the different drones coming in. Yeah, Ivano-Frankivsk was hit pretty hard, I think.
Yeah, and people are sleeping in subway stations and in the parking lots for safety. And I think that's important, because Putin thinks that he can defeat defeat Ukraine like he was able to defeat Chechnya, where he's just going to bomb them out of existence until they're done. And there's several different differences between Chechnya and Ukraine, and that's what Putin is missing, and that's why in the end he's going to lose.
And not least that, of course, I mean, history shows, as the Blitz shows, that actually bombing people just hardens their resolve. But also, has he seen Kiev? It's huge. You would need, I don't know, millions of drones to reduce it to rubble. It covers many, many, many square miles, and yeah, it's just not possible. I mean, it's not like cities further east where you drive around and they're smaller and you can see signs of bomb damage. No, I mean, you have to really seek out the impacts.
Jonathan, I'd like to ask you a question.
Yeah.
We have a viewer who says, I might be wrong, but while Kellogg was there, 0 attacks on Kiev. And I heard the exact same thing.
It's true. It's true. In fact,
what is the meaning and jokes about it?
They've made little memes where it's Saint Kellogg, providing some kind of immunity. No,
Saint Melania, Saint Kellogg, yeah.
I mean, what it means, I think, is relatively simple, and a friend of mine was saying at recent conferences as well, where you have a lot of bigwigs in town, they don't want to actually kill ambassadors or senior politicians, because they know that will not go well. They certainly don't want to harm or kill the US envoy, because again, I think they understand that would be going too far and it would not be in their interests. So whereas the propagandists are clearly and openly mocking of Trump, of his wife Melania, as I think we talked about before, and the bombing of Ukrainians is a kind of form of mockery to the US and its powerlessness, they don't want to take out a senior figure. That would be a calamity, I think, for Putin's strategy, because I'm not convinced that Trump is ideologically opposed to Ukraine. I think up to now he's been transactionally opposed to it, and like you said, he wants to pick a winner, and he hasn't had the mindset or the information or anyone telling him that Ukraine is a winner or has anything to offer him. So he's not interested. And now that seems to be changing. Like, Ukraine seems to have something, right? They seem to be actually, scoring some points against the big guy. This is unexpected. I mean, to anyone who's been following the story, it's not unexpected. But to him in his information sphere, it is unexpected. But yeah, killing his representative or maiming him, that would not go down well, and it could unleash quite a serious response, I think. And again, it's a form of mockery as well. When Kellogg's there, his life is worth more than any Ukrainian life. As soon as he goes, they hit again. So they find a way. They find a way to sort of mock whichever action they take. But that's my interpretation of it.
Thank you. Also, I guess we should spend a minute on Agent Melania, because there are people who feel like she is like a Saint Melania, who is like, I don't know, the one person in the Trump household who watches the news. I don't know. But I think that what got me questioning this is listening to an interview with Trump and Epstein biographer Michael Wolff, who, while discussing different women surrounding Trump, points out that Melania is never there. And I'm going, okay, so if she's never around, and he says things attributing to her that really should be attributed to, I don't know, Director of National Intelligence or somebody like Secretary of Defense, like, Mr. President, while you are talking to Putin, he is still bombing Ukraine. None of that is happening. It's like at home. His wife pointed it out to him, and we don't even think that the wife, reasonably like is around. So why is he appealing to this magical ghost of Melania? I think this is it's almost like blaming a spouse for when things like, I have to go home, guys. My wife says that I'm staying out too late with you guys, so it's not me, my wife. So if but she's hot. So that's kind of, just it has this kind of a everyday locker room feel to everything he says, that I don't know if Melania is just part of his kind of a narrative, or whether he actually talked to his wife, and whether like the problem is not even that, and problem that he should be speaking to his officials that are giving this information.
I mean, who knows? I mean, maybe in the brief period they have to be seen together in front of the cameras, maybe she manages to get the odd sarcastic comment in here about his extreme weakness and how he's being thoroughly mocked. I mean, she might actually enjoy that. That could be, if she wants to be spiteful to him, that's quite an easy target there. But this makes sense. I've seen at close quarters this strategy. So and so says, right, you got to go and tidy your room, or so and so says whatever. I don't approve of this, that, and the other. I'm fine with it, but you better be careful, because your mother doesn't like that. And then you speak to the other party, and they're like, yeah, I never said that. I don't really care one way or the other. It's it's a classic strategy. It's a strategy of bullies. It's a strategy of weakness. It's a strategy of people who don't like confrontation, but nonetheless would like to manipulate people. And so it is quite a weak and manipulative kind of strategy. Therefore, I think it's credible, because these are characteristics which he clearly has.
Jonathan, what do you think about, let's take a shift away from the personalities issues of our president to think about something more uplifting, like, for instance, what is going on with Azerbaijan, which is like basically telling Putin to F off, and is like supporting Ukraine with words said in Russian so that Putin could understand that, like praising Ukrainian troops. What's going on?
I mean, what's interesting here, again, this started a few weeks back, where Azerbaijan and Armenia, who have just recently had a minor war, let's not forget, and Armenia was explicitly not supported by Russia, whereas in the past they would have expected to be. So you've got this sense, I think, in Russia's sort of near east and south, that the empire is losing its power, its ability to project military force, its ability to influence events, its ability to really threaten behind the scenes. So it may still be threatening, but it's becoming more and more toothless and clawless. I think the first step that really was shocking, and then you had the Z-Patriots literally losing their minds, was Armenia saying it's going to withdraw from, the Russian security architecture. Then you had Armenia and Azerbaijan starting to talk about Russia in its absence, like, okay, maybe we can agree to bury our differences, and maybe we can agree not to have Russia manipulate us into fighting each other, which weakens and divides us. Hey, let's say nasty things about Russia instead. This wouldn't happen if it was in its full imperial power. This wouldn't happen if the sort of KGB, FSB and its military was able to project the kind of threat that it's been able to in the past. This, to me, signifies a significant weakening of Russian power in its former imperial territories. And the very symbol of the Azerbaijani president actually being presented with, the patches and badges of Ukrainian regiments, and then saying, yeah, you guys are doing a good job, keep it up. That's kind of wow. That's really, and that's a message, not just, he doesn't just put that out there accidentally. Because he would be fully aware of the repercussions of doing that if Russia was powerful. He'd be gone, quite frankly, and there'd be tanks on his border. It's absolutely fascinating what's happened there. And of course, Z-Patriots understand it. They're losing their minds over this stuff. They're screaming about how these countries need to be invaded and taught a lesson, but they can't do it because they're impotent.
Do they really have minds? What I'd like to kind of see if you agree or not, that behind Aliyev's back, there's metaphorically three soldiers. There is the Azerbaijani army, which has shown itself to be quite capable, but also Ukrainian soldier, which is basically making all of this decrease in Russian imperial domination all over the world possible by taking the brunt of the Russian attack, all of that, but also Turkish support for Azerbaijan and the role that Turkey is playing in the region, at least. And maybe that's allowing, maybe there's some meaning to that Azerbaijan is projecting Turkish strength onto Russia.
It could well be. And one wonders if there's also something going on with China, because none of these countries will want to upset China. Yes, Turkey and others have key strategic relationships, but no one wants to upset the Chinese because there's always the potential there for trade opportunities, for infrastructure opportunities, and so on. So I wonder whether China's not also playing an interesting game. Well, we've known for a long time that Turkey is playing all sides to its own benefit. It's doing the old British thing, which is, making sure powers in your neighborhood are balanced and don't get over strong and overconfident. And that's kind of, a classic kind of imperial game. But is China also playing a curious game? Is it on the one hand giving the impression that it's all out for Russia, but at the same time consolidating its own influence in Russia's backyard? And then one wonders, well, for what? It's a curious game that's unfolding.
I think when it comes to China, the main statement that resonated in Ukrainian space is the statement by their Chinese foreign minister that China cannot let Russia lose. But I think that that's really ultimately what we've been hearing and saying all along, is that that's why it's important to whip Russia now so that we don't have to deal with China later. And so China just looks at it from their point of view and says, no, we need this thermometer up, Europe's ass. I'm sorry, to just continue seeing how people are feeling about China.
Yes. Note he didn't say we absolutely must help Russia to win. In that respect, it's a little bit like Sullivan doctrine towards Ukraine. Ukraine mustn't lose. No mention of victory.
China will be with Russia as long as it takes.
The foreign minister didn't mention victory. So it's quite possible that the attritional stalemate, having a bleeding edge on Europe, is actually more beneficial than any one power emerging on top of that situation. And certainly they don't want a Russian collapse. They don't want a collapse of authoritarianism in Russia, because that denigrates the whole idea of global authoritarianism. I mean, you don't want to be in part of a dwindling club that broadly aligns with that same sort of values.
To actually even
then,
make this, even to bring it to a more recent piece of news with China that really is just what I was asked about today, that Putin is supposedly planning, being invited to go to China for military parade right at the time when the 50-day window is supposed to close, and possibly Putin will be there as well. And it really, they're counting on Ukraine just not being there by the end of the summer, it seems like.
That's a curious thing, isn't it? This is the Yalta of tyrants, which has long threatened, actually. I mean, we've had Dugin and others talking about this now for 2 years, having a sort of authoritarian summit to carve up the world between them. And this loops us back to the whole Epstein thing, because Trump may have decided that 50 days, let them slug it out, Squid Game or whatever, but Trump may need distractions before that 50 days is up. He may need some pretty major stuff to pull the wool over people's eyes, especially as his MAGA base becomes a little bit like, or what if our guy is the deepest deep state, which is going to be interesting. So something like the invasion of Greenland may be back on the table if he needs a proper distraction.
That's not where I wanted to go. I was hoping that he would just decide to help Ukraine. That would be a nice little distraction. But yeah, you're
That'd
right.
be
I mean,
nice.
if you can't help, if you can't hurt Putin, then I guess you got to invade Grenada, Panama, or Greenland, or except that Greenland is part of Denmark, and Danes are allies in NATO. And that's kind of, I think, a problem. But then again, Canada seems like a great place to call a state.
Except the head of state is the king of Britain, so effectively you'd be at war with Britain too. I mean, it's a little complicated.
Yeah, and I love the fact that there was a recent poll that came out where most Americans don't even know why we separated from Great Britain. So people are, working through this process one step at a time. There's so many countries in the world, and
I have some
them,
American friends that always ask me about Harry and Meghan and whatever, and I'm like, dude, I'm a Republican. I mean, I don't give a shit about all of this stuff. I mean, I'm sure they're nice enough and they help tourism, and I wouldn't want to see them put up against a wall and shot. That's extreme. But I'm not a royalist, and I do not follow all the ins and outs. And yet, and that really perplexes some of my American friends. Like, what? How can you not? How are you a patriot? And yeah.
Yeah, just if you had if that wouldn't be happening if Trump was your president. Yeah, so that's what's going on in our world, and I think that it's exciting. I don't know why people keep watching television or anything. I think that the real world news is providing us with a lot of opportunity to see what's right, what's wrong, what values, what doesn't matter. I think that I find it interesting to watch how democracy is sometimes not as important as survival of statehood, as different concepts, freedom, how they all are competing for survival and priority in today's world. And I think that's just why it's awesome to subscribe to Silicon Curtain and Rashkin Report in English, and stay tuned and check in once a week to see what's happening, because you're doing a great job. And I try to just kind of play along, because I think English is something that I currently I'm streaming a lot more in Russian than I am doing in English, but I'm starting to kind of move into English space thanks to you and actually a couple of Ukrainian journalists. And it's a pleasure. I think that we're helping build a bridge between cultures, and I think your viewers and my viewers appreciate it. Thank you.
I think it's super, super important. Do you have a sense of where and what ethnicity your Russian-speaking audience is from, or is that a tricky thing to understand?
Well, it is only tricky in the sense that a lot of Russian speakers use VPN, but if YouTube dynamics can be trusted, my number one market is Ukraine. It's about 40% of my viewers and listeners are there. And it's amazing when people are saying that I am, sheltering from a rocket attack and I'm watching Rashkin Report because I want to know what's going on. That's really awesome. I mean, it's awesome to be able to help people in this moment and to keep them company in the difficult situation. A second country, and second and third, it's usually a tie these days between Russia and the United States. In the United States, because like you're not for a king and queen, I don't support Donald Trump, and I think that considering that most Russian speakers in the United States are Trump supporters, kind of creates a sort of a ceiling of common sense for me that I know I'm not going to exceed. But I am very grateful to a huge kind of uptick in the growth of my Ukrainian viewership as people realize that Donald Trump is not Santa Claus or Easter Bunny and is not going to deliver things that was for some reason was promised to them by people who said Biden is terrible and Trump is going to be better. And when things didn't go well, that a lot of viewers said, hey, what about that Yuri Rashkin? He's been saying this all along. I was like, well, yeah, hello, welcome to the channel. So that's been really nice. And I think that just as, and I think there's some viewers in Israel as well. And even though my my views don't line up with their government at all. But it's interesting to kind of find your language that you want to communicate in an audience and just be yourself and people find you.
Absolutely, and as long as we are true to our perception of reality, then I think you can even carry people with you who share fundamentally different views on how politics should be shaped. And let's face it, I tried to watch some of the John le Carré stuff recently, spy thrillers. And I got halfway in one of them and I thought, hang on a second, this is so tame compared to our reality. Let's, it cannot compete anymore.
Exactly. And then I get to have amazing streams with people like yourself. And then in a few minutes will be my, every 2 weeks, I get together with Vitaly Portnikov and discuss, get his analysis on the world and share that with his viewers and my viewers and other great Ukrainian journalists and thinkers and Russian speakers that, there are a few that make sense from all over the world. And I like to give them a little bit of a stage on my channel. And, we all are doing as Igor Eidman, but I don't think he is the one who really said it, but he's the one that I remember it from. We all have our stretch of the front. We all have our battlefield, part of our battlefield, and you have yours, I have mine. And hopefully it create some cover and help some people understand the situation better. I think that clarity is the main thing that I'm trying to accomplish here, because there's a lot of people who are very smart, but if we don't have the right information, if we're looking at the wrong place the threat might be coming from, it's going to make it very difficult for us to prosper, and that's the goal.
Absolutely. Well, I'm very grateful to this for the format we've created here and the fantastic information we can get out to the audience. Yuri, thanks so much.
Thank you, Jonathan.